Get in this quick here. We've got Brad Briner, the North Carolina State Treasurer. We just had an episode last week talking about the North Carolina pension and healthcare and some of the things going on there. Today we want to talk about investing in North Carolina as a teacher and what those options look like. And then some of the issues that teachers have submitted. They've sent in questions, and these are just things even organically, as I've met teachers and I am a teacher, some of the concerns of being a North Carolina educator. We just want to hear what you have to think about that. So let's jump back for a second. We talked about the different bands with the healthcare. If you make under it's $50,000, you pay a certain premium. From $50,001 to 65, you pay a different premium. One of the concerns, and this might come up later too, of being a veteran teacher in North Carolina, and I know you don't have this power. You're not the General
Yeah,
Assembly,
right.
but our current pay structure is from year 15 to year 25. You're essentially frozen.
Hmm.
You're frozen. You don't make any more money, and we know inflation's going to go up maybe 3-4% a year. Veteran teachers again feel like maybe they're taking the brunt of this. They get frozen, and then all of a sudden, some of them see that their wages are going up, and then we don't have a budget in place still. I just wasn't sure if you knew how our pay scale worked on that because you're looking at frozen from 15 to 25. I don't know where else a company does that where you don't get a pay increase for 10 years.
That's unusual. I wasn't aware of the specifics of the pay structure. I'm sure someone has a reason for that, but I don't know what it is, and I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and then that's something that, I don't know what your political aspirations look like down the road, but I think a lot of people don't understand how this works. And we'll talk more about this on the back end. But our critical issue right now is, this is coming out in late November, early December. These healthcare premium hikes are getting ready to happen in January, but we still haven't passed the state budget. So many teachers are going to be losing money until that budget even passes because their premium is going to go up. But we're on the pay scale from last year, and the pay isn't going to keep up with the new premiums. That's a tough thing.
Yeah, I mean, there is tax reduction coming in the new year. So I think you'd want to consider that as you think about whether people are getting a net pay increase or decrease. By our math, the tax reduction that's scheduled to go into force, depending on a lot of deductions that you may or may not take, covers the vast majority of the premium increase.
Gotcha. So that's something we'll have to look at. So teachers, look at your paycheck, look at what it was last year, and even with
Yeah.
the premium increase, we can do some comparing, and I guess we'll have more concrete numbers in the next 60 to 90 days.
Yeah.
So let's talk about teacher investments. A few years ago, North Carolina moved from Prudential to Empower. Can you talk about where you, as the North Carolina treasurer, stand with Empower? Are
Yeah.
you happy with what they're doing? And can you talk about how investing through them is a good option and what your thoughts are?
Yeah, no, Empower's been a great partner for us. There was a couple bumps in the road in the transition, I know. That was before I became treasurer, but I'm very aware of the call center delays, and we've worked through
Yes.
all of that, thankfully. The truth is, in any transition, we just went through the one on the state health plan from Blue Cross to Aetna. You unfortunately know that you're going to have some bumps in the road. You seek to iron them out as fast as you can, and Empower did a great job of doing that. They are, kind of best in class in terms of technology, in terms of expense. So no, we're really happy with what they bring to the table. Part of the deal with the 401k program, the 457 program, but also everything we do at Department of State Treasurer is these are incredibly cost-efficient options. So if you are a member of our 401k program, you'll get a very small fee to your account for all the administrative costs, but that's it. The index options that underlie it, the other options that you can avail yourself of in the 401k or the 457 are all best in class in terms of cost efficiency.
Yeah, I think I look at my fees quarterly
Yeah,
are like $6.50 or something like that.
right,
So I'm paying fees under $30 a year,
right.
and I have approaching six figures in a 457. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't beat that.
And one thing that people don't
Great
know,
deal.
which we're trying to educate everyone on, when you retire, you do not have to take your money out of our 401k or 457. You will get approached, and God bless America, people are capitalists and they create businesses around this. When you approach retirement, there's a whole fund management industry out there that knows you may have a 401k balance, And they will try to convince you that you have to leave the 401k or the 457 so that you give them your money to manage and they can charge you a bunch of fees. You do not need to do that. You can stay, you can actually roll other IRAs and other things into the program and benefit from that low cost option for as long as you want.
So just to be clear for people who might not be sure, just know that you can't contribute anymore either. Once
Correct.
you're done, you're done. Like I've had teachers say, man, I can't wait to retire, but now I'm going to keep really pumping up that 401k. I'm like, well, that comes out pre-tax from your
Right.
paycheck. You have to be working, and you can't set that up with your pension to do anything
Correct.
like that.
Right.
So yeah, you can't
It's
contribute to it anymore. So make sure you're aware of that. And that's something I always tell people is, if you're thinking about retiring, maybe at 50 and maybe you haven't done the investing you want to do, you now at 50 plus have these catch up contributions where you can contribute even more money into these accounts, which is really important. On the show, we talk a lot about on the podcast, and we wrote a book called The Fit Position, how teachers can build their finances from the ground up.
right.
I love the option of a 457. And anybody that we have on the podcast, financial experts, media
Right.
personalities that say, wow, if I could have a 457, that would be amazing. It's basically deferred compensation.
Right.
And the cool thing about it is you don't have to wait until 59 and a half years old like you do, say, a 401k or a 403b or an IRA. As
Right.
soon as you separate from service in North Carolina, if you are one of these early retirees at 50, 51, 52, you have access to that pot of money. And so to speak, you can reach your hand into that cookie jar and not pay the 10% penalty to do
Right.
that. Now, what I've found, and I don't know how much you know about it, is we obviously have 100 counties in North Carolina, but I've come across other people that I've tried to help, and they're like, I'm in X county and I want the North Carolina 457 because it's low cost and it's great. But in my county, I can't. They offer their own
Right.
plan. Some other provider, some insurance annuity provider has come in, and essentially I can't, it blocks me from investing in the state plan. Are you aware of that? And what do we need to do about that? Because a lot of these insurance, they're charging 2%.
Right. Yeah, I'm aware of that. Local control is the issue. These are the local employing units. They get to make the decision that they want to make. And so if you're employed by one of those local units and you find this is the situation, uh, maybe go aggressively to your county commissioners or whoever's making that decision and communicate your views because maybe you'll have an effect that way.
So this isn't a state thing. This is
It's not.
a local thing, and you guys can't really do anything about it. But I
Right.
love that our county finally said, we're not even going to mess with these local providers anymore.
Yeah.
Let's just default and go to the state plan. So I actually contribute to the state 401k, and I do the 457 as well. And they're both great plans. I highly
They are.
recommend them. All right. So this is kind of fun here. You're an
Yeah.
investor. You said you're a nerd.
Yeah.
You're essentially, I'm putting
Yeah.
words in your mouth here.
That's true.
You don't seem too nerdy, but you're on a financial podcast, and I have the financial podcast. How nerdy is that? I don't even get paid for it. But if you were a teacher, and right now, things are tough with inflation, but let's say that you're a teacher, you're not giving investment advice here, but if you could start out as a 22-year-old teacher in North Carolina, knowing the prudential plans that we have, and you had $100 a month to invest, how
Yeah.
would you invest? How would you make your portfolio up based on the options that North Carolina teachers have? I don't know if you're allowed to answer this question, but we're talking about you. You're not giving investment advice.
Right. And I think the limit would be if I told you individual securities to buy, which most of these programs don't allow you to do anyway.
Right.
Time horizon is everything in investing. So if you're 22 years old and you're going to invest consistently over the years, unless you need the money tomorrow for some reason, there's no reason not to be fully in the stock market. This is the long-term highest expected return. It is going to have much more volatility. There's going to be many more turns and twists in that road. But if you can be consistent in that approach, that is the right risk profile for a 22-year-old. Now, I'm 48, as you get to 48, you might want to think a little bit differently. Maybe you take it down a little bit, but there's this old maxim in investing where you should have, 100 minus your age in the stock market. And I think that's wrong. I think it's more like 125 or even 150 minus your age in the stock market. If you're dealing with the challenges of inflation and low real rates and things like that, I think people need more exposure to the stock market in the long run. We talked a little last week, I suppose, in the episode about where the equity market is valued right now. So I recognize that, sometime 6 months from now, when the stock market gets punched in the face someday, this is going to sound short-sighted. But I think the most important thing to do is to stick with it. And, in April, when we had Liberation Day, that's the advice I gave at the top. Sometime soon, I guess. That's the advice I'll give. And when we get the next crisis, the advice I'll give again. Stick with it.
Warren Buffett has famously, he had his famous challenge, right? He had a $1 million bet in the early
Yes.
2000s, and he bet a bunch of hedge fund managers that I'll just invest in the S&P 500, set it and forget it, like the
Yep.
old infomercial, and you guys can actively trade and do all these things. I bet you the S&P 500 wins. And Warren Buffett won that. And Warren Buffett has been interviewed multiple times where he says, for the average investor who doesn't really want to think about this, 98% of Americans can just invest in the S&P 500, which is the 500 largest companies in America. And the way I explain it is it's almost like the NFL draft.
Yep.
Every year there's players in the NFL that have had really bad injuries that they can no longer play football. Some people age out, but every year there's a draft of the new and upcoming best players from Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, North Carolina, whatever, and they're going to replace them. But you always have the best 700 players or so
Right.
in football in the world. That's kind of how the S&P works with being self-cleansing. Is it a mistake to just say, as a 22-year-old, let me go 100% on the large cap growth fund? Or would you mix it up and maybe do some small cap, mid cap in there?
I think
If you were me.
simple is always better. So first, there's a big world out there that's not just the US. The US is exceptional in so many ways, and we are blessed to live in this country, but other people are trying too. And
Right.
there's some great companies outside the US. So I don't know. I wouldn't mess around with small cap, mid cap, things like that. I think the primary toggle I'd worry about is US, non-US.
Gotcha.
And if you don't believe in things outside the US, it'd be 100% S&P. If you do, maybe 100%, it's called the All Country World Index, which is, literally every country everywhere, and it's cap weighted, so you get the big ones mostly. Uh, I would look at it that way. I wouldn't complicate it beyond that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think when you overcomplicate it, it almost makes it harder and you get paralyzed by all the options and things like that. And then you're freaking out about returns and this one's doing better than that one. Just again, set it and forget it. And the average return has been about 10%. Some years it's down 20%, some years it's up 28%.
Right.
But over the last 50 plus years, it's averaged around a 10% rate of return.
Yes.
If you were to come talk to my personal finance students here in North Carolina, what number, if they were playing with a compound interest calculator, would you feel safe for them to project? You're going to do 100 a month into the S&P 500 or into whatever fund. Some Dave Ramsey has famously said 12%, which I disagree with. I think that's crazy. Some people say 8%. What would Brad Briner, the North Carolina treasurer, say to your
Yeah.
kids if you had them playing around with the calculator?
So people often cite that 50-year number. Oftentimes, actually, they cite a 40-year number because that's when the trough was. If you look at the period before that, it was a really bad period. From 69 to 82, the stock market lost money. So, we will see that someday in the future, I suspect. So I would be on the lower end of that. I would say kind of 7% is what, if you observe far enough back in capital markets history, you get out of stock markets.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Very good. So plug in that 7%.
It's
If
still
you're
a great
somebody that's
number, right?
Yeah, it's
Cash is
still a
making
great number. I mean,
three and a
your money's
half, and
doubling every 10
yeah,
years or so,
right,
which is awesome. All right. So that is the investment piece. I think that's all I had for teacher investments. I want to talk about the state of teaching in North Carolina because we already talked about the pay scale, which
right,
maybe you weren't super privy to that. You've got lots of
yeah,
important things going on. So I've been a teacher, as I mentioned, for 20 years in North Carolina, and I've seen the playbook. Neither party, in my opinion, has treated North Carolina teachers great over the years when it comes to pay and things like that. But you'll see a headline in the News and Observer that teachers are getting a 5% raise or an 8% raise. That story runs on the news at 6 o'clock and on the front page. But what a lot of people don't talk about is what the General Assembly has tended to do is if we get an 8% raise on average, 7% of that goes to the first year teachers, and then the veteran teachers get the 1% raise. Um, do you think that we should do more to help veteran teachers when it comes to their pay. Because right now, if you have a bachelor's degree in North Carolina and you've taught 30 years, the max pay on the current pay scale for 2025, because we haven't had one approved yet, for 25, 26 is $53,000. You're obviously college educated, you're a professional. The average college graduate right now, they say, makes over $60,000 a year, but we top out at 53. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to teachers and like a fair pay? I don't think I deserve 100 grand a year, by the way.
Yeah.
But what's fair? I think 53 seems awfully low, especially when you compare to the states around us.
Yeah. I look at these things as competitive matters, right? And you know, what is the market telling us about our salaries in any profession? And where you see material vacancy rates, you have a problem. So, you know, from my purview, I look at the corrections industry as an example. They have a 30+% vacancy rate. It seems to me we have a compensation problem there pretty clearly. So I don't know the specific answer to your question, but I know that we had a real problem with junior teachers, and that is why the General Assembly did what it did around that. That seems to me to be sensible if that's what data is telling you. I don't know what you see as you go up the salary spectrum in terms of vacancy rates and departures for other states. That's what I'd want to know to answer your question properly. I'm a data guy. And, you know, pay is a deeply emotional issue for people. I understand that. It feels like people are judging your worth as a human, and I get all that, and I don't trivialize that. But ultimately, you know, we have a finite number of dollars in the state, and we got to think about where we spend them, and we've got to take the inputs from what the market is giving us and learn what we can from them before we make decisions. That's the best way to make decisions.
I think that's one of the hardest things is when you face that salary schedule
Yeah,
and you're getting a raise. I think the beginning pay right now is 41,000, and then it goes up to like 51,000
yeah,
or so. But once you hit that year 15, you're frozen. Groceries are going up, gas is going up.
right.
I don't know of many other states where you're going to be frozen. And just to be clear for those listening, you're not the governor, you're not in the General Assembly, you have nothing to do with making any of these laws, but you are an elected official.
Yeah,
And I just want to address some of these things because, I didn't know where you stood on them. So, again, I've been a teacher for 20 years and I've been in that frozen gap, but,
yep,
my kids playing travel sports and all the other things that come with
sure.
that,
I understand.
trying to save for college makes it difficult.
Definitely.
And according to Bankrate, as I mentioned, says the average first year college graduate this year in 2025 makes 60,000 a year. That's 7,000 more than a 30-year veteran teacher makes in North Carolina when you don't include the local supplements, which some counties don't have, and other supplements are under $1,000. They're not much. It seems like again, this is kind of the same issue. One of the critical issues is over a 30-year career, you start at 41 and you top out at 53. I just can't imagine many professions where you want to stick with that if you know that over 30 years you're only going to make 12,000 more dollars a year. And I think you're a Republican,
Yeah,
and a lot of the Republican issues around education seem like, hey, let's reward, like Vivek Ramaswamy's talked in Ohio, let's
yeah,
reward the teachers who are doing a good job. There should be an incentive to make more money, but it's really hard to put the numbers and the business plan in the world of education when you have home life and poverty. And I don't get to control the 35 kids that are sitting in my classroom and what their parents are doing with them at home.
sure.
What would you say a solution? I know this is a lot, but is there a solution to this? Like, how do you view education teacher pay?
Yeah. In 2025, I think we can measure a lot more things than we used to be able to. And I think that's true across a lot of industries. Uh, have I studied exactly how we measure teacher performance and student outcomes in detail? No, I haven't. But I'm a big believer in paying for performance. And I think we can do a better job of aligning those things. I do sit on the State Board of Education. And to be honest, I am routinely surprised to the negative at the progression we're making in educating our students in the state. And I don't look at that as a teacher problem. I look at that as a bureaucracy problem. So to me, the innovation that occurs at the local level, at the charter level, and the private level should all be shared much better to deliver better outcomes. And that is how we deliver better experiences to our students and ultimately how we pay our teachers more too. That to me is the recipe. It's easy to say, it's much harder to do. I recognize that. And I would want to spend a lot of time thinking about all the inputs you'd want to gather to get to a better answer than the one I have off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think one of the issues I've seen is, I'm from Ohio and a lot of us had moved down to North Carolina 15, 20 years ago. But in North Carolina in 2013, not sure how aware you are of this, we became the first state to no longer pay teachers an incentive to have their master's degree. There used to be an
Yep, I'm
incentive that
aware.
it'd be a 10% increase.
Right.
And we're the only state that I know of that no longer pays for the teachers to have a master's degree. There was a research done, one study that showed that having a master's degree doesn't impact the outcome of learning in the classroom. That was one study. But to me, like having kids in the public school in North Carolina, sometimes it's not always a numbers thing, but it's the teacher that's in Michigan or they're in Pennsylvania or New York and they want to come down to our beautiful state and they realize like one of the first default answers down south is yeah, but they live up north. The cost of living so much more. Well, I could teach in Ohio, in Northeast Ohio, where I'm from, and make
Yeah.
85,000 a year, and the cost of living is way cheaper than it is in Raleigh, North Carolina. So how do you convince a teacher that's making 85 with master's pay there to come down here and you're not going to get paid for a
Yeah.
master's and you're only going to make 53? So we're one of the fastest five growing states in the
Yeah.
country. So we have more students, bigger classrooms. And if we want to recruit teachers, to me, it's not even about does it make a difference in the classroom, but it's about, hey, recruiting other teachers and giving incentive if you do feel stuck on that pay scale. There's a big difference between making 53,000 and then getting master's pay and now making 60,000. It's a
Sure.
$500-600 a month difference. Any thoughts? Again, these you don't know
Yeah.
these questions ahead of time. I
Yeah.
didn't prep you for any of
Yeah.
this, and you
I
don't
mean,
make these decisions. But what are your thoughts on that, just in general? Like, should a teacher have an incentive to go out there and further their education and get paid for it?
I think teachers should have incentive to be better teachers, just like anyone in any profession. And if people are becoming better at their job, they should be paid more to do that. Unclear how that correlates with master's degrees. I have lots of friends with master's degrees, and some of them use them all the time, and some of them don't ever use
Right.
them whatsoever. And the idea of paying them the same would not resonate with me. But certainly, if it leads to better teaching, better outcomes for the students, of course. How you measure that, difficult. One of the things that I find frustrating about the whole conversation is that there's not a whole accounting for it all. And that's on both sides, by the way. You'd want to look at not just base state pay, you'd want to look at local supplements, you'd want to look at all the other things as well. And then on the other side, you'd want to look at the inputs that people receive into form of the students and what's going on at home and adjust for that. Understand that it's about improving. It's not about necessarily a level in as you measure people. So I'm sure that as people study these things, they find them much more complex than I do because I look at it from afar. But it's just an honest accounting for the conversation of total compensation and total results and comparing those things.
And maybe it's something, again, we're just throwing out ideas here, but I just had an idea of, the 10% pay, let's say it's an average of $5,000 per teacher that gets it per year.
Yeah.
What if you took whatever that number would end up being, assuming you're kind of guesstimating how many teachers would get a master's? What if you threw that into a separate pot of money and when the school performs, we used to have a thing called ABC money. I don't know if you remember that, but when I was a young teacher in North Carolina, if your
Yeah.
school, your individual school met or exceeded growth, there was actually a bonus check that every single teacher got in the school. So
That's
it
cool.
almost felt like you were like even more of a team that, hey, those
Yeah.
English teachers knocked out the English portion. And even though I'm a history teacher and my area isn't a tested area for growth, when we cover more reading in class and do things to help the English teachers, that's going to benefit them and that's going to help our graduation rate, which we should all be doing those things anyway. But it was kind of nice to get recognized from the state when you exceeded growth. And there
Sure.
was money and a bonus tied to that. So, I think that almost covers some of the other issues of like the home life
Right.
and everything else because it's looking at the holistic picture of the
Right.
school. I'd love to get a $5,000 bonus. I know the
Sure.
principals get bonuses when they meet or
Yeah.
exceed growth, but the teachers, we don't.
And I mean, you look at educational expenditures over time, and what you observe is that the only percentage expense that routinely grows is administration. And I find that incredibly unsatisfying. Uh, it's not intuitive to me why that should be. It's the same, by
That
the
is
way, in the
true.
healthcare system, which is immensely annoying.
Yeah, I've looked at the charts before, and it seems like a lot of the money in education has gone into administrative things, whether it
Yes,
be county offices, whether it be at the state level, administration, different things like that. And I'm not trying to pit teachers versus administrators or anything like
right.
that, but it is interesting when you look at those charts, the numbers don't lie on that. Last question that I had for you, and this has been a lot of fun, is back when things changed in the General Assembly, we got rid of master's pay. Another thing is teachers no longer get health care in retirement if you were hired after 2021. That was a huge benefit. Man, I don't even think teachers realize how much that is. I've talked to a lot of teachers that, or non-teachers that in the private sector, they wanted to retire early,
Right.
too early for Medicare at 65. And
Right.
just for a husband and wife that don't have kids on a plan, you're looking at like 2,500 bucks a month.
Yeah.
What a deal for me that when I retire at 50,
Yeah.
I can have insurance for under 600 a month for my wife and my kids. Is that something that you would support coming back, where teachers do get that benefit because we aren't getting as much pay as areas in other parts of the sectors?
No, the expense of that is extraordinary. So what's going on with this is actually not retirement health care post 65. Everybody gets that, right?
Right.
So what we're actually talking about when we talk about retiree health care and the state health plan is anything between their 30 years and 65. That is an extraordinarily expensive time to cover people in healthcare. And so the state, frankly, just can't afford to do that. That's why the decision was made. If we shortened that, if we said, okay, you can get retiree health care from 60 to 65 or 58 to 65 or something like that, it begins to be affordable. It begins to be in the realm of the possible. If you allow people to retire at 48, let's say they started at 18 years old,
Yeah.
uh, you literally can't afford it as a state.
And as you
So
get older, generally more health issues, more doctor visits, things like
but
that.
it's not the post 65, right? That's what I think
Yeah.
people don't think about, that Medicare takes over there. So you'd solve a lot of problems in the state health plan and the pension system and others if you set a floor for retirement age. That is not a conversation we've had as a state. It's not going to be well received by certain populations who retire early. I understand that. And I'm not necessarily advocating for it. But in terms of making this all affordable, simple, it's setting 58, 59 years old, somewhere in there, would solve all of these problems.
So if you're grandfathered in like I am,
Yeah.
and you were hired before January 1st, 2021, please understand it's gone now for the newbies. But man,
Yeah.
you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars of
Hundreds of
savings
thousands.
for somebody
Yes.
like me that is
Yeah.
going to probably retire at 50. And I
Right.
have 15 years basically on the state where they're covering me.
Yes.
Now, question, I don't know about this. Let's say that I do retire. I'm one of these new teachers and I want to retire at 55. I have 10 years
Yeah.
until I get to Medicare. Do I have the option to still pay to get the state plan where I can pay, but it's not non-contributory? Or do I have to go
Yeah.
out and get my own health insurance in the Obamacare or go to the marketplace or
I'm
whatever?
pretty sure you have to go out and get yours.
Okay.
It's not a situation that I'm aware that we allow.
I didn't think so.
We got a lot of different plans though. So it could be that some obscure plan has that option, but I don't think so.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think that was an option. I think once, you're in that new bracket of you're hired after January
Right.
1st,
Yep.
2021, once you're done with the state and you retire, sure, you still get your pension. You could
Right.
draw that at 50 years old or 48.
Yep.
We have people going
Yeah.
to early colleges now that are graduating at 19, and they might even start teaching really young.
Right.
And with their added time of sick leave, they could retire early.
Yeah.
One last question. I know that this really has upset teachers. Is another thing that happened was all state employees, to my knowledge, except for teachers, get a thing called longevity pay. So if the teachers aren't going to get, the raises, if you're capped at 53,000 and you're not getting the raises, they're going to the new teachers. Uh, do you have any opinion of like, again, it might not even be performance. You don't know how that teacher's individually doing, but do you like the idea of, hey, you've been loyal to the state as a teacher for 20 years, 25 years. We should reward your service for that. Is that something you would support coming back
Yeah. I think what
without
you
doing the
see,
research? I know you haven't done these.
yeah, I haven't, but what you see in the value of the pension system is that it's in those years like 20 to 30 when you really accrue a ton of value. So I know most people don't feel it that way, but mathematically, that is what's going on. So you're getting a ton of value in your pension system in those year 20 to 30 of service to the state. So in a manner of speaking, there is longevity pay there. But specifically, I haven't studied the issue now.
Gotcha. And I know that's one thing, just that the teachers have been frustrated because every other state employee does get that, but then we don't
Yeah.
get that. And they're like, hey, we're a state employee too. So I just wondered your thoughts. So this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Again, if you're listening, he did not have these questions ahead of time. He was literally doing this off the cuff here. So I appreciate you even being willing
Happy to
to
do it.
come on this show and handle some difficult questions that teachers had. And if you're a teacher out there, yeah, I'm sure there's other questions maybe I could have asked, but we don't have the treasurer's time for 24 hours or anything like that. Any final message though to the teachers of your state, um, just in general?
Sure. It is my pleasure to be here, first of all. Thanks for having me. I also wanted to do this to speak directly to the teachers. I do think that sometimes you guys feel like no one's paying attention, and I hope that that's not the case. We spend a lot of time trying to make sure that the benefits that we give as a state are worthy of all that you do for the state as teachers. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to be here. The other thing I'll say is that we have an open door, and you can email me, brad.briner@nctreasurer.com, anytime. I can't promise I'm going to get back to you immediately, but we love your feedback. We know we can get better, and we're committed to do so. We're here to serve all North Carolinians, and you're a very important part of that.
Brad, we appreciate your service to the state, and I look forward to seeing how things go and getting those numbers with those returns up to 6.5% again. And who knows, maybe getting some cost of living increases along the way when we all retire. So thank you for your
Sounds
service
great.
to the state of North Carolina and good luck in your future. And I really hope that this created something transparent for the teachers in our state to actually talk to somebody who is a highly elected official. So thank you again to you and your
Thank you.
team. You guys are
Pleasure.
awesome. And thank you, of course, to all the teachers for joining us and the Fit family. We hope you join us for next week's episode. I hope you have a great holiday season. As always, be frugal, be fearless, and be a lifelong learner. Take care, everybody.